Hey, what's up? In this session, we're going to talk about bass tone. Now, as with all things tone, this is very subjective. However, in the context of the worship, the modern rock worship genre that we largely live in, bass tone's a little bit less subjective. But there's a lot of ways to get to a serviceable and valuable tone from the bass. The biggest thing to understand is the bass that you're playing. This specific bass right here it's called a Jazz Elite. So it's a jazz bass, it's got jazz pickups, and it's got an active and a passive setting. When it's active, I have a tone control, bass, treble, and mid. And when it's passive, I just have volume control. I prefer the active setting. I feel like it gives me a little more punch, a little more bite, and a little more control of all the things that the bass is doing. Some basses like a P bass, for instance, which only has a split pickup right here in the middle, doesn't have an active setting or a passive setting. It is what it is. Some of them are active, but it's just like an internal active battery and not a switch. That's fine. Some P basses are passive and they sound fantastic. It's not a right or wrong thing. It's on the bass that you have, which one works. And so for this specific jazz bass, I think that active kind of serves the sound the best. Also, maybe you're picking a bass or maybe you're leaning in a way or one or the other. This has a maple fretboard, as you can see here. It's not a dark rosewood fretboard. A lot of times the maple fretboard will give you a little bit more punch and attack, a little more bright, not so muted and not so, it's not as warm, which is fine. There's plenty of controls here to help warm it up or get some attack back if it's too dark on all kinds of basses. But a maple fretboard will provide you a baseline tone that is different than a rosewood fretboard. So choose what you like better. Neither one is right or wrong, especially for what we're doing. I got this for us because I think it sounds really great, and I really love in the rock setting, a 5-string with a maple fretboard. I love P bass or jazz, either one. But understand your controls. So on this specific bass, there's a tone section here. All these knobs down here all do something different. And this little switch right here is an active-passive switch, and I prefer it in the active mode on this bass specifically. It gives me a little more control of what's going on. And there's a volume knob. I keep it all the way up. And then there's a panning knob, which allows me to go from pickup to pickup or a blend of the two. Let me show you what that sounds like. Here's all neck pickup. Sounds great. Here's all bridge pickup. That's this guy back here. Hope you can hear the difference. One's it's subtle, but one's a little bit more round and woofy, and not in a bad way, but round and more low end because it's kind of attacking picking up the strings more up here in this region. And the other one is picking up the sound way down here, and it's a little more bright. And so the bridge, too bright for me. And here's halfway. This is between both of them. I think that sounds good too, but I feel like I'm still missing a little bit of that focused attack that I really love out of this bass because of the maple fretboard. And so I probably pan another 20% towards the bridge, so I have like most of the bridge and just a little bit of the neck pickup in there. I like that. It's pretty close. I mean, these are subtle changes, but you'll find trying to fit in the mix, you might want a little bit of that bridge in there and not too much of the woofy stuff in there. They're going to EQ some of that stuff out of there anyways, so let's help out as much as we can on the front end. So another thing to think about when you're considering bass tone is where your hand is placed and where you're plucking the strings. Notice how the bridge is way back here. This pickup is way back towards the bridge plate here, and the neck pickup is more towards the neck. Listen to what happens when I just play the same note and just move my hand. So again, somewhat subtle, but where you put your hand really does matter. And it's not like a right or wrong. There may be certain parts of certain songs that you need to be on the warmer side, and so you may end up playing something like way up here. And every now and then you want to drive a little bit, and you may be like here, a little bit of the punch. Also, if you're using a pick, where you play the pick matters. All of those things combined with where you set the pickup blend all totally matter. So if you're chasing something specific, listen, adjust, replicate as close as possible. If you're just kind of trying to find your favorite sound, play with all of those things. If you've got bass and treble and mid control, you can play with those. I typically end up leaving everything, there's a little notch in the middle of all of these things. I end up leaving all of these settings like right in the middle, and I'll boost the bass just a little bit. But it really depends on how your bass naturally sounds plugged in and what you should do with there. But for this bass right now in this context, there's no EQ on it whatsoever. I leave that everything in the middle. You can hear that bass, the treble here. Bass, out, back in, mids. So you can hear how there's a lot of dynamics that you can control right there. A good place to start is straight up the middle on bass, treble, and mid, and just leave it. Get your pickup selection blended where you want it to, and then adjust based off maybe what the band or the MD might think you need, or the front of house might think you need. A good place to start is just down the middle. So there's a lot in all of that as you're talking about bass tone, from the bass you're playing, the type of wood the neck is, the type of bass it is, the type of bass pickups, active, passive, controls or not, hand placement, pick, fingers, all that stuff. Lots of things to think about. So as you're chasing something, if you're trying to replicate, do as best you can and make the adjustments to replicate. And if you're just trying to find your sound, mess with it until you're happy. Hope that helps. Let us know if you have any questions.